Hi, my mom works in an office and I know very well how it feels. When you build everything yourself and then someone comes along with a Rolex catalog and tells you who your work belongs to. This video isn't just content for the sake of views. It's a story about real experience and I want someone to recognize themselves in it and not repeat other people's mistakes. All names, companies, and events in this video are fictional and have been changed.
He fired me mid-sentence. I was in the middle of walking him through our Q2 retention strategy, slides polished, data verified, calm and buttoned up, when he waved his Rolex catalog at me like a traffic cop and said, "We're done here. You're terminated. Effective now." Not a question. Not a warning. Just a spoiled man in a too tight suit, sipping cucumber water and acting like he'd bought a vending machine, not a consultancy. He didn't even close his laptop, just swiveled in his chair, pointed at his assistant and said, "Tell ops to move every client contract to corporate, today." And that's when I said it, calmly, even politely. I can't do that. If you're enjoying this story, take 2 seconds to like the video and subscribe. It helps way more than you think. 97% of you listen without subscribing, and it's what keeps these stories coming. He looked up slowly like I'd just spoken Klingon. "Excuse me?" "I said I can't do that," I repeated, leveling my voice the way you do when talking to a child holding scissors. "Because the client contracts aren't with the company." He blinked. "They're with me," I said. "Personally." That's when I saw the panic flash across his face. Not full-blown yet. Not fear, but that first flicker, the kind that hits when someone realizes they just yanked a lever that isn't connected to anything. A year ago, I wouldn't have imagined this conversation. Back then, we were Blue Marlin Analytics, a boutique data advisory with big clients, small egos, and a team that knew its craft. I'd helped build it from a second-floor co-working space with 4 interns and a microwave that sounded like a dying goat. I was the first female hire, the 3rd full-time employee, and eventually, by quiet default, the client whisperer, the one they trusted, the one they called, the one who didn't lose accounts. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud, but I knew how to build something that held. Over 7 years, I rewrote every client onboarding document to include dual execution pathways. Sign with the firm or sign with a named strategic advisor. It was framed as flexibility, a way to support advisor-led continuity in case of mergers, buyouts, or, God forbid, executive clown parades like the one now sipping Perrier in front of me. Most clients chose me. Every choice was legal. Every clause approved by counsel. I operated under my own LLC, separate, documented, fully disclosed to the board. But when Hadrian Equity acquired us, they didn't care about nuance. They were after logos and headlines, not client relationships. They rebranded the firm to Hadrian Strategic, replaced the logo with something that looked like a finance bro's tattoo, and started referring to our clients as portfolio velocity targets. The staff? We were legacy nodes. I stayed quiet. No tantrum. No exit drama. I stayed because relationships take time. Because walking away too early makes people wonder what you're hiding. But I watched them. Watched them lay off the data quality team. Watched them move procurement to a shared hub in Jersey City. Watched them post TikToks from the new marble lobby while pretending they understood cloud-led forecasting. And I kept delivering results. My clients didn't notice the noise because I buffered it. I knew when to reroute calls, when to offer reassurances, when to remind legal that they didn't have authority over agreements they'd never signed. But the moment Grant Laszlo, Hadrian's founder's nephew, MBA by nepotism, looked me in the eye and said, "You work for me now," I knew it was time. He thought he'd bought me. Thought I was part of the furniture. He never asked why 83% of our top-tier clients hadn't signed the corporate renewal forms. Never noticed that the master services agreements had different headers, different signature blocks, different termination clauses. He didn't read the paperwork. He just assumed. And in this business, assumption is the most expensive line item on the balance sheet. The first message came in like it was nothing. A little Slack ping from Hadrian's operations manager. New kid named Bryce who wore Yeezys to client calls and once asked if strategic advisory was like a consulting podcast. "Hey, can we get a consolidated list of all client contracts so we can push them into corporate systems?" No hello, no context. Just casual digital entitlement wrapped in emoji punctuation. I didn't take the bait. just kept it clean. Hi, Bryce, I typed. All client contracts are under dual execution per Section 3.2 of the Advisor Framework. Happy to clarify anytime. No reply. No thanks. No got it. Not even a gif. But the next morning, HR pinged. Subject line, quick chat, which, if you've ever worked in a corporate merger, is code for, we're about to pretend this is a conversation when it's really a procedure. I stepped into the glass fishbowl conference room, new chairs, no soul, and was met by two people I'd never seen before. One in HR blue, the other in corporate innovation beige. The beige one started smiling before I sat down. Just wanted to align on some structural clarifications, he said, tapping a printout. Looks like some of your clients are still listed under your LLC. We'll need to consolidate those under Hadrian. Like that. Just poof. As if contracts were furniture they could reassign. As if the names on those agreements, legal, notarized, filed with state authorities, meant less than their new email signatures. I let him finish his sentence. Let him breathe in his own assumption for a beat. Then I opened the folder I'd brought. Inside, copies of the Advisor Framework, the original board approval of the dual execution clause, and a notarized filing showing my LLC's custodial status as primary counterparty on every Tier 1 agreement. I slid it across the table like a chess piece. Quietly. Slowly. I believe this covers the structure, I said. Page 3 is Section 3.2. Happy to walk through it. The beige one stopped smiling. HR Blue coughed, but they still didn't get it. They thought this was some oversight, some oopsie that legal could clean up before lunch. They were used to people folding, signing things they didn't understand, walking away for severance and a LinkedIn post about new adventures. What they didn't see, what they never see, is how much groundwork someone like me lays before the first red flag ever hits. They didn't know about the clause I'd spent 6 months refining with counsel, quietly locking in advisor-level custodial control. They didn't know I'd personally walked every client through the structure, that I'd built relationships deep enough to withstand rebrandings, restructurings, and now removals. They thought it was about access, about control, about the ease of a database migration. What they didn't realize was that every contract they wanted was tied to a person, not a platform. Every dollar of revenue they were circling in their forecasts came with a signature next to my name, and I wasn't giving it up. Not for a VP title, not for stock options, not for their vision deck filled with buzzwords and zero substance. Still, I nodded politely as HR listed the next steps: review, alignment, compliance, a possible transition. And then I left them with one final sentence. I'm happy to cooperate within the boundaries of what's contractually permitted. They thanked me, and I smiled, because I already knew the contracts weren't moving. But the panic? That would. The first thing I saw was the catalog, not a briefing folder, not a P&L, a damn catalog, Rolex, limited edition, laid open across the new walnut desk like he was selecting a trophy wife for his wrist. Grant Laszlo didn't stand when I walked in. He didn't shake my hand. Just motioned toward the leather seat across from him while swirling a sparkling water like it had a stock ticker in it. You know why you're here, he said, like we were old friends playing a rigged game. I didn't answer. Didn't nod, just waited. He tapped the catalog closed with 2 fingers. We're rolling everything into corporate, every client agreement, effective immediately. I kept my tone level, not cold, not warm, just surgical. I can't do that. He stopped mid-sip. What? The client agreements, I repeated, they aren't corporate. They're executed with me personally. My LLC holds the contracts. It's all properly filed. Board approved pre-acquisition. He blinked. It wasn't confusion. It was offense, like I'd told him his money wasn't real or his chair wasn't leather. Then he laughed, short and sharp. That's not going to work. I met his eyes. It already does. That wiped the smirk right off his face. For a second, he just sat there, like he was buffering, trying to remember if someone had warned him this might happen, if one of the overpriced consultants or half-drunk lawyers at the acquisition party had whispered something like, "You know those clients aren't actually yours." But no one had, because nobody read past the first page. Finally, he leaned back and asked, real slow, "Then why are you still here?" I didn't answer, just stood up, reached into my bag and placed my badge on the table. Quiet. Final. No theatrics, no exit monologue. He expected me to argue, to grovel, to pitch some half-hearted compromise about rolling some clients into the fold. But I'd been ready for this since the moment I saw his name on the press release. Grant Laszlo, founder's nephew, private school tyrant. The kind of man who thinks I'm a builder means ordering men in vests to break things. He didn't build Blue Marlin. He didn't know our clients. He didn't understand why, when everything else in this industry is smoke and buzzwords, trust is the last currency that actually holds. And I held it. Not the firm. Not the damn fountain in the lobby. Me. He finally spoke again. Quieter this time. What if I made you an offer? I stepped toward the door. You already did, I said without turning. And then I left. No shouting, no slamming. Just the sharp click of my heels on their polished floor. That was the sound of 7 years leaving the building. But the clients? They hadn't gone anywhere. Yet. By noon, they'd already folded into crisis mode, emails flying like confetti from the legal team's war room. The subject line on the first one read, "Urgent, contract consolidation request, per transition protocol." Sent from Hadrian's legal chief, a man I'd never met, but who'd CC'd 6 people to make sure his urgency felt like gravity. He referred to me as our former lead. 2 hours ago, I was client relations gold. Now, I was a footnote, a loose end to be swept up before lunch. I didn't reply. A few minutes later, a follow-up popped in from someone further down the food chain. Their junior associate, probably still using the firm's onboarding checklist to figure out how Outlook works, tried a gentler approach. "Hi, hope your day's going okay. We seem to be missing the master services agreements for Tier 1 clients. Would you mind forwarding?" Would I mind? Of course they were missing, because they'd never had them. What they had were copies of the shell agreements, the ones drafted to run through Blue Marlin systems when clients opted into the corporate route. But nearly every Tier 1 client had gone the other way. They signed directly with me, my LLC, as their strategic advisor of record, and every single one of those contracts lived in a different folder, a separate chain, outside the scope of Hadrian's little spreadsheet fantasy. So I replied, calmly, precisely. Attached, the articles of organization for my LLC filed years ago, state certified, public record. Linked, Section 7.4b from each MSA, hosted on secure client portals with timestamps, co-signed originals, and custodial metadata. Section 7.4b read clearly, either party may terminate without cause, but the strategic advisory relationship is held with the signatory advisor, not the institution. Any reassignment of custodial authority requires mutual consent. I even bolded that last sentence for them, like a little highlighter on the grave they were about to dig with their own compliance team. They hadn't read the fine print. They'd seen the client logos on pitch decks and assumed ownership was as simple as a keystroke. They thought people were assets, that if they bought the building, they'd bought the heartbeat too. But I'd been preparing for this long before Hadrian ever stepped into the picture. I'd seen what happens in these acquisitions. Good people gutted, clients treated like revenue widgets, strategy replaced with slogans. I'd watched legacy teams walk away broke while founders cashed out, and the suits with PowerPoints made it look like vision. So I'd structured for separation, I'd filed everything right, framed every clause with a legal team that knew where to place the knife edge. Silent, patient, surgically exact. It wasn't just foresight, it was protection. Not just for me, but for the clients. They deserved continuity, stability, not some bloated hedge fund repackaging their trust as a quarterly line item. Hadrian's legal team didn't write back that afternoon. I imagine they read the clause once, then again, then brought in someone from compliance to confirm that yes, it actually did say what it looked like it said. By the end of the day, I got one more email, this time from a higher up. Short, cautious. We'd like to discuss possible pathways to mutual alignment. Please advise availability. Pathways to alignment. Translation. They finally realized they were standing in a house with no deed, and the person holding the key had already left the front porch. The scramble started quietly. Emails first, then calls, then a full-blown executive stand-up that apparently ended with Grant hurling a Mont Blanc pen across the glass boardroom wall because someone dared to say, contractually restricted. They tried to play it casual at first. One by one, Hadrian's exec team began reaching out to the Tier 1 accounts, calls masked in polite phrases like realigning account ownership or ensuring a smoother service experience under our new operating structure. Translation: they were trying to strong-arm the clients into jumping ship, into switching from me to them, into rewriting legal history with a phone call and a smile. But the clients? They didn't budge, not one. Every call ended the same way. Thanks, but we'll stick with her. That's who we signed with. That's who we trust. Some didn't even wait to be courted. By the end of a day 2, 3 of our largest accounts had sent formal notices, legal notices, advising that Blue Marlin, now Hadrian Strategic, no longer had standing as a counterparty, that all communication should be routed through me, that any attempt to modify contractual custody without mutual consent would constitute breach. That was the moment I imagined Grant started sweating. He didn't yell at first, but when legal confirmed out loud in front of the entire room that there was no override clause, that every client contract had been cleanly executed through my LLC, that every rights reassignment required my signature, that's when the meltdown began. He barked at them to find a workaround, told ops to mirror the contracts anyway, get them into the new system, even tried drafting a transition consent template as if the clients would blindly sign off just because the PDF had their logo on it. But nothing stuck, because I hadn't left loose threads. Every line of those contracts, every custodian field, every jurisdiction tag, every dispute clause pointed to my firm, my structure, my terms. I'd built it that way because I knew how people like Grant operated. They thought control came with ownership, that if they acquired the name and the office lease and the Slack channels, they automatically inherited the soul of the business too. They never understood that client loyalty isn't bought, it's earned. Quietly, over years of showing up when things go sideways, of taking 11 p.m. calls, of catching mistakes before they cost someone their bonus or their job. They thought I was just a name on an org chart, one they could replace, but I was the one who wrote the chart. And now that it was gone, they were panicking, digging through shared drives, emailing old admins, trying to find some backdoor, some miscellaneous clause they could weaponize into leverage. There wasn't one. There never was. All they had was a brand they didn't understand, wrapped around contracts they didn't own, with clients who wouldn't return their calls. I didn't gloat, didn't respond, didn't warn. I just watched the scramble unfold from a safe distance, phone silent, inbox clean. They bought the name, but the business, that was never for sale. By Friday morning, they finally did the math. Not the wishful kind that lives in investor slide decks, but the real numbers, the ones that show up when clients stop answering emails and start forwarding legal disclaimers. 83%. That was the number. 83% of retained revenue quietly tethered to my name, not theirs. 83% of the firm's lifeblood walking a very fine contractual tightrope. And I was the anchor. They hadn't seen it coming because they'd been counting logos, not people. They thought client retention was a checkbox on a spreadsheet, not a relationship stored in phone contacts, built over canceled weekends and too many airport lounges. So when the silence hit, when the weekly revenue sync didn't match projections and legal flagged that they couldn't force transfer a single Tier 1 account, the real panic began. You could feel it across the system. Outlook threads pinging like Morse code, Slack statuses suddenly green at midnight, people who hadn't spoken to me in a year sending sudden, hey stranger messages like we were still work friends and none of this had happened. One by one, account managers started reaching out. Some were careful. Hey, just checking in. You still planning to support us through the quarter? Others dropped the act. Please tell me you're not leaving. They told us the contracts would carry over. And a few just asked flat out, are we screwed? I didn't give them certainty, didn't give them rage either, just quiet, clinical replies. You're welcome to contact my office directly. We're reviewing options. It was the truth. I hadn't made any public declarations, no dramatic exits, no LinkedIn manifesto with hashtags and humble brags. I wasn't looking to burn the place down, but I wasn't going to put the fire out either. Let them squirm, let them guess. Let them write 10 different contingency memos and call 3 law firms for opinions they should have gotten before they changed the locks on my office. Because at this point, I didn't need to make a move. I just needed to stay still. Let the weight of their assumption do the rest. And it did. I heard from an old colleague in finance that Grant started canceling travel by noon, that Hadrian's founder had called from London demanding a precise retention forecast, that the board's internal tracker was now labeling my contracts as disputed assets. Disputed. As if my name on every page didn't make it clear. As if I hadn't spent years building a business inside their business, with permission, with documentation, and with more trust than any of them would earn in a lifetime of sparkling water strategy calls. But sure, let them dispute it. I'd already won the only vote that mattered, the clients. And as of that Friday afternoon, they were still calling me, calm, steady, and loyal, not because I asked, but because I didn't have to. It came in late Sunday night, time-stamped 11:42 p.m., like Grant thought hitting send just before midnight made it more urgent, or more noble. Subject line, continuity discussion. The body was dressed up in polite desperation. Words like mutually beneficial, strategic unity, long-term alignment. He wrote like we were partners navigating a storm instead of what we actually were. A man trying to put a price tag on something he never built and never understood. Attached to the email was a revised contract. VP title, corner office, equity options, vesting aggressively. And buried in paragraph 6, a request to reconsider transitioning assets into Hadrian ownership for purposes of operational integration. Assets, that's what he called them. The clients, the relationships, the late nights and panic calls, and 7 years of building trust that outlasted rebrands, layoffs, and botched product launches. Just assets, like I was holding onto a printer they wanted back. Also attached, a 10-page NDA, slippery little thing, full of airtight phrasing about confidentiality, goodwill, and post-agreement limitations. Clause 4.2 even tried to block advisor-led contact for any clients mentioned in Exhibit A, which conveniently was blank. My attorney read it in 6 minutes flat, then poured another coffee and drafted one line, just one. Thank you for your offer. Unfortunately, no transfer of contract rights is possible without mutual consent, which is not granted. That was it. No threats, no counteroffer, no name-calling or legal theatrics, just a full stop, the kind that makes a boardroom go quiet. I never responded personally, didn't need to. There was nothing left to say to a man who thought he could fix 7 years of disregard with a title and a stock grant. He'd bought a building, he wanted a blueprint, and now he was standing in the empty shell of someone else's work, wondering why the lights wouldn't turn on. Let him wonder. Let him draft 1,000 more versions. Let legal put together a task force. Let compliance circle back with another memo on advisory custody complications. None of it mattered, because the contracts weren't just mine. The trust behind them was too. And that's the thing no buyout can purchase, no offer can replicate, and no NDA can erase. Monday came like a hangover they didn't see coming. The board meeting kicked off at 8 a.m. sharp. Hadrian ran on punctuality and panic. I wasn't there, obviously, but I didn't need to be. Half the people in that room had already reached out to me quietly over the weekend. I was on their minds, even if my name didn't appear on the slides. But my contracts did. The screen glowed in that sterile blue corporate hue, the numbers huge and humiliating. Q2 forecast variance, retention risk assessment. $18.4 million. That was the shortfall. Not due to market correction, not a pricing error, just one line in every client record. Custodian, external advisor, confirmation pending. Grant stood at the head of the table, still wearing last night's poor judgment in the form of tired eyes and a crumpled collar. He kept trying to steer the story, blaming data sync delays, temporary legal ambiguities, a minor misunderstanding about custodial structures. But the numbers wouldn't bend, and neither would the contracts. A senior board member, one of those calm, clipped voices with the kind of power that doesn't need to yell, cut through the babble. Who holds the contracts? No one moved. No one breathed. Grant hesitated. You could almost hear him try to find a workaround, a softer phrase, some version of the truth that didn't make him look like a child playing CEO dress-up. Finally, he muttered it, quiet, barely above a whisper. She does. Every head turned to legal. She didn't blink. She just nodded. That was the moment the room changed. The illusion of control, the fantasy that this was all just a legal hiccup, that shattered right there. No yelling, no accusations, just silence. A new kind of silence. The kind that meant careers had shifted and priorities were about to get rewritten because they'd gambled the firm's future on a spreadsheet assumption and lost it to a footnote they didn't read. I wasn't in that room, but I knew exactly what it felt like. I've been in those rooms before. I know what it's like to feel the floor tilt, to realize the power dynamic just flipped and the person you dismissed is now the person holding the gate. No one called me that day, not Grant, not HR, not legal. The silence wasn't strategy anymore. It was surrender. They didn't have leverage. They didn't have trust. They didn't even have the paperwork. All they had was the echo of a name that didn't belong to them and contracts that never had. 2 weeks later, the paperwork was filed. New firm, clean slate, my name on the letterhead, no board, no middlemen, no quarterly memos about synergy or cross-platform client touchpoints. Just the work, and the people who trusted me to do it. I didn't make a scene, didn't announce it on LinkedIn with a branded photo shoot or a pseudo-humble caption. Just sent a quiet email to the clients I'd served for years. We've launched something new. If you'd like to continue, our door is open. They didn't hesitate. No follow-up needed, no pitch decks, no awkward negotiations. Every single client I'd signed over the years followed. Some sent champagne. One sent a handwritten thank you. Most just sent over new contracts by noon. They weren't following a company. They were following consistency. I didn't gloat. Didn't take victory laps. That's not how I was built. And I didn't trash Hadrian. Not publicly, not privately. They weren't villains, just arrogant, careless, and in over their heads. They assumed authority was ownership, that buying the name meant buying the heartbeat, but the heartbeat walked out the door the day they thought VP of Client Strategy was a sufficient leash. By the time Q3 hit, Blue Marlin was gone, absorbed quietly by a boutique firm in Chicago that specializes in asset recovery, the kind of acquisition that comes with apologies, not press releases. Rumor has it, Grant didn't even finish the quarter, and Hadrian, they buried the truth where these firms always do, in the notes. Page 47 of their Q3 investor update, small font, dry language, but the line was there. Key client contracts executed under Section 7.4b, advisor-specific custody, not eligible for the post-acquisition assignment. No explanation, no context. Just a quiet confession carved into investor legalese. I read it one morning while stirring coffee. Didn't laugh, didn't forward it. Just smiled once, because they'd bought the building. But I'd kept the blueprint. And now I was building something new, with no ceilings, no locks, and no one left to underestimate me.